the mainstream media has done such a disservice to these girls because it has sanitized that trafficking network. I mean, those girls were younger than 14, definitely. And the viciousness that some of them were subjected to. I mean, some of these, and I saw this in the Franklin scandal, some of these guys like to beat up these little boys or little girls. I mean, and some of these guys are unbelievably powerful. You would know their names. And that's what they like to do. That's how they get off.
Do you know the names?
Some of them, yeah.
Are they in the black book?
Yes.
Who are they?
Yes. One of them is a former prime minister. And he, according to one victim I talked to, liked to beat up victims.
Why don't you want to say the name? I'm just curious.
I think that just the information that I've given you is enough for someone to basically determine who he is.
Where could they find the names?
Okay, so Gawker published the Black Book. It's online. If you Google Nick Bryant Gawker Black Book, it'll be there.
It's out there.
And actually, this gentleman is circled. Alfredo Rodriguez was the house manager.
Well, hold on. Before we get into all that, where were they flying these girls? Were they, I mean, and who would they fly with?
These girls were flown everywhere. And they were flown with politicians.
How many at a time?
It all depends because we don't really know. I mean, we've got passenger manifests, but it's hard to know how honest. But there was definitely, like Alan Dershowitz, he said that he'd never flown with Jeffrey Epstein. And in the article that I wrote for Gawker, he's on a passenger manifest with Tatiana and Claire and Alan Dershowitz said, "I've never molested any of these girls, blah, 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 blah." And then he's nailed, though.
Who is that? I don't know who he is.
Alan Dershowitz is a famous attorney.
Okay.
That was part of the Jeffrey Epstein network. And he got nailed. I mean, he said that he only flew with, actually, he's one of the most famous attorneys in the world. There's been, I think it was Reverse La Fortune about Klaus von Bülow, who he was convicted or arraigned for killing his very wealthy wife, and Alan Dershowitz represented him. So, and he is was a leading scholar at Harvard, legal scholar at Harvard. And he was a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. And one of the girls that has come forward and said that she was molested by Alan Dershowitz. Another girl has said that she wasn't a minor, but she had been pandered to Alan Dershowitz. And then another woman has said, another Epstein victim has said that Epstein had a house in New York and that there would be quote unquote model auditions in the second floor. And there would be young girls there. And Alan Dershowitz went right up the stairs to where the young models were being auditioned.
So they would fly these young girls 11 to, let's just say 11 on up.
I mean, some of them were 18, 19, 20, 21.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, Epstein liked girls that were like 13 or 14. But if you wanted someone that was younger, I mean, Epstein is a psychopath. Mm-hmm. If you wanted someone that was younger, he didn't have any problem with that. If you wanted someone that was older, he didn't have a problem with that either. I mean, he had the type of girls that he liked. But if you were part of that network, you'd get anything you wanted.
So where all would they fly him to? Obviously his island. Where else?
Some were flown to Los Angeles. I've got a bunch of passenger manifests too.
Did he just have houses everywhere?
He had houses. He had a house in Palm Beach. He had a house in New York City. He had the island. And then he had a place a huge place in New Mexico. And there is a girl that has come forward in a deposition, and she said that she had been molested by both Bill Richardson and Bruce King, and both of them had been former governors of New Mexico. And actually, Bill Richardson was a Democratic high flyer. He was Bill Clinton's energy czar. And what's really interesting is Epstein had to register as a sex offender everywhere except New Mexico. So obviously, some people very high up in the New Mexico political machinery were doing favors for Jeffrey Epstein. And according to one of the victims, she was molested by two former governors of New Mexico.
Was everywhere just all of his properties were involved in this? It wasn't one specific one.
No, I mean, Epstein, I think, and he had a place in the UK, he had a place in France. I mean, this was his business.
How many girls do you estimate were involved in this from start to finish?
Oh, man, it's tough. Like Epstein, just himself was, as his addiction accelerated, he was like 3 girls a day. So, but then you get in, you're looking at Epstein, 3 girls a day, but then you're looking at all these guys that he pandered girls to. Hundreds. And he was doing, now granted, like when he probably started in the mid 90s or early 90s, he wasn't as full throttle as he was, in the early 2000s. But he had a run there of 25 years where he was trafficking girls. And just his own personal deviant appetites were 3 a day. So that kind of gives you an idea of how massive that trafficking network was.
How did he get started?
How did Epstein get started?
How did he get started?
Where
did he come from?
He comes from Coney Island, from a working class family in Coney Island. And I've heard stuff about him that he could have been chosen earlier to be part of this as a young man. So he was a college dropout, and he got a job teaching math at Dalton, which is the most prestigious school in New York City.
Who would have recruited him at a young age?
I do not know. It's one of those things like with King and Spence. They were in Southeast Asia, and then they come back to America, and then all of a sudden their star rises. The same thing with Epstein. We do not know.
Who do you have any?
I do not know. William Barr, the Attorney General under Donald Trump, who covered up Epstein, and actually he covered up Franklin too, because he was the Attorney General under Bush 1. When the Franklin scandal was covered up. So he's a really dirty guy. I mean, and he's been involved in all kinds of other dirty stuff too. His dad was running Dalton shortly before Epstein got hired there. So people have speculated that his dad had something to do with Epstein getting hired, but we don't really know. But what's really interesting is William Barr's father wrote a sci-fi novel about intergalactic sex trafficking, which is, kind of strange. And then Jeffrey Epstein ends up working at Dalton, and then he has this. He gets involved in with a number of trading companies, and then ultimately